The state Republican agriculture commissioner tells me that the stepped up immigration enforcement is taking a toll on the industry, not just here in Texas, but beyond.
I said it, a lot of people left, and all the workers left, and people were, all they had the crops out there ready to harvest, so they didn't have anybody to pick them. So a lot of farms lost their whole crop and went out of business. They lost all the money.
Beautiful pasture that we have to graze our cattle on. Our goal is to take the best care of it that we possibly can.
Somewhere deep in the American heartland, the fields are burning not from drought, not from wildfires, but from desperation. These flames weren't started by nature, but by farmers themselves setting fire to the very crops they spent months nurturing. It's not protest, it's surrender, a final act of grief in a system that no longer works. All across the Midwest, the signs of collapse are unmistakable. Silos stand overflowing with unsold grain. Barns are boarded shut. Entire stretches of farmland have been abandoned, left to wither under the summer sun. Tractors sit idle, not because there's no work to be done, but because there's no longer any reason to do it. This isn't an isolated crisis. It's a nationwide unraveling. According to the latest agricultural census, more than 141 to 733 farms have vanished in just a few short years. These weren't just businesses, they were lifelines, traditions passed down through generations. And now, quietly and without ceremony, they're being erased, one by one. Yet outside of rural communities, few seem to notice. There are no headlines tracking the disappearance. No emergency hearings in Congress. No national broadcast acknowledging that entire farming towns are being hollowed out in real time. The silence isn't just chilling, it's telling. But while the United States watches its agricultural backbone disintegrate in slow motion, something curious is happening just across the border. Canada, facing the same global challenges, isn't just surviving, it's thriving. Export orders that once belonged to American farmers are now landing in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Grain buyers are shifting north, and Canadian officials behind closed doors are treating this shift not as a crisis, but as an opportunity. So, what went wrong? Why are American farmers abandoning the very land their ancestors fought to protect? And why, in the shadow of this collapse, is Canada quietly celebrating its rise? Across America, the farming crisis wears a different face in every state, but the ending is always the same. Farmers walking away, forced to abandon a life they once believed was unshakable. In Texas, fields lie empty not from drought or debt, but from the absence of hands to work them. A wave of ICE crackdowns has driven away migrant labor, leaving produce to rot in the soil and harvests to die on the vine. In California, the pain runs even deeper. Skyrocketing costs have turned even the most fertile land into a liability. Over the past 3 years, electricity rates in the state have surged by a staggering 42%, outpacing fuel, fertilizer, and even labor. For farmers already operating on razor-thin margins, this jump wasn't just a burden, it was a breaking point. Many have been forced to shut down irrigation systems, cut planting cycles short, or abandon entire plots altogether. The sun still shines, the soil is still rich, but it's no longer enough to survive. In Arizona, farms are being choked from both sides. Ice raids have emptied work camps, while relentless droughts have drained reservoirs to historic lows. Without water and without labor, even the most resilient growers are surrendering their crops and their futures. Nebraska tells a quieter but no less tragic story. When foreign buyers pulled their wheat contracts, the collapse was swift. Grain elevators were shuttered, local banks pulled out, and entire towns began folding in on themselves. Farmers here didn't just lose income, they lost credit, community, and hope. Meanwhile, in Iowa, once the heart of American agriculture, a generational shift is accelerating. Family farms are crumbling under debt, their heirs no longer willing to inherit the burden. Young people are fleeing to cities not out of rebellion, but out of survival instinct. The result is a slow-motion unraveling of rural identity, one farm at a time. Each state is suffering its own unique trauma shaped by geography, policy, and circumstance, but the outcome is universally devastating. America's farmers are giving up, not because they want to, but because they no longer can afford to stay. This crisis didn't appear overnight. It's the result of relentless pressure from every direction, a slow squeeze that's now pushed tens of thousands of farmers past their breaking point. First came the labor crisis. With ICE intensifying raids and immigration policies tightening, farms across the country were left without the seasonal workforce they depend on. Crops that were once picked by the truckload are now left to rot under the sun. It's not just a labor shortage, it's a systemic breakdown, and farmers have been given no viable alternative. Then came the cost surge. Fertilizer prices have more than doubled since 2020, driven by global supply shocks and energy volatility. On top of that, utility costs are soaring. In California alone, some farms have reported electricity bills jumping over 45% between 2022 and 2024, forcing operators to scale back or shut down vital irrigation and refrigeration systems. Even basic water access has become a luxury in drought-prone states like Arizona and Nevada. Add rising land taxes and machinery costs, and the math no longer works. But even those who managed to survive these domestic pressures faced a cruel surprise abroad: the collapse of export markets. In recent years, major global buyers from Mexico to France have quietly walked away from U.S. wheat, corn, and soybean contracts. Instead, they're buying from Canada, citing greater consistency, quality, and political stability. U.S. farmers who once fed the world are now left with overflowing silos and no one to sell to. And as the stress builds, so does the emotional toll. Bankruptcy filings among farmers have surged. Rural suicide hotlines are overwhelmed. In once proud farming families, children are rejecting the idea of inheritance altogether, not because they don't respect the work, but because they know the truth: you can't survive doing it anymore. This isn't about laziness. It's not about giving up. It's about waking up to a painful reality in 2025. Being a farmer in America means working harder than ever and still losing everything. While American fields burn in desperation, Canadian soil is being sown with ambition. As U.S. farmers torch unsold crops and walk away from generations of labor, Canada is quietly moving in, not with noise or celebration, but with strategic precision. Wheat exports have seen a steady rise, and more importantly, Canada is signing new trade deals with key partners like Japan, the EU, and Mexico, deals that once belonged to American producers. But this isn't just about exports. Canada is playing a longer game. Provinces like Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba are expanding their agricultural infrastructure, scaling up production, and investing in technologies to increase yields and resilience. These regions are beginning to replace traditional U.S. powerhouses like Texas and Iowa, not just in volume, but in global trust. And while the U.S. tightens its borders and chases away its farm workers, Canada is opening its doors. Through targeted immigration policies, it's actively inviting experienced American farmers to resettle, offering them land legal status and a second chance if they bring their skills and leave the chaos behind. Government support goes beyond handshakes. Canadian farmers are backed by crop insurance programs, digital land settlement initiatives, subsidies, and low-interest capitalization loans aimed at stabilizing and modernizing the sector. Where American farmers are told to tough it out, Canadian farmers are told, here's how we'll help. So, while the U.S. bleeds out its agricultural soul, Canada is quietly planting the seeds of a new farming empire, one field, one family, one contract at a time. This isn't just the story of farmers losing their jobs, it's the unraveling of entire communities. As farmland is abandoned and property values crash, local governments are bleeding revenue. In towns once sustained by agriculture, school budgets are being slashed, rural hospitals are closing, and even fire departments are downsizing, all because agricultural land no longer generates enough tax to keep these services alive. What begins in the fields doesn't stay in the fields. It ripples outward: empty storefronts, shuttered banks, vacant schools. One by one, small towns are disappearing from the map, not because of natural disaster or war, but because the economic engine that once fueled them has simply shut down. And the questions get darker with each passing season. If Iowa, the very heart of American agriculture, can't survive this storm, who will grow wheat for the next generation? If Texas, Iowa, and California all fall, who's left to feed America? And if Canada continues its steady rise, securing contracts, welcoming farmers, building resilient supply chains, could the unthinkable happen? Could the United States, the former breadbasket of the world, become a country dependent on imported food from the very nations it once dismissed as secondary suppliers? Because this isn't just a farming crisis anymore. When the very people who once fed the nation are now being forced to abandon their land just to survive. Who will be next, as American farmers pack up generations of legacy and leave behind fields they once called home? The silence from Washington grows louder. Is this simply an economic shift, Or is the U.S. government turning its back on the very backbone of the nation? This crisis isn't happening in a vacuum. It's the result of deliberate policy choices, tightened immigration laws that cut off labor supply, lack of market protections that left American crops exposed, and a trade strategy that allowed trusted export partners to walk away straight into the arms of Canada. In the end, this isn't just about wheat or water tariffs or tractors. It's about whether the United States is willing to fight for the people who fed it for centuries, or if it's already decided they're expendable. What do you think about this wave of agricultural exodus? Share your thoughts. Is this a policy failure or an inevitable shift in the world economy? Do you think this agricultural exodus is a policy failure or part of an unstoppable global shift? We want to hear your thoughts. Like, share, and subscribe. If you believe these stories need to be heard because behind every vanished farm lies a truth no country can afford to ignore.